Мне сказали, вам нужен водитель.
Я собираюсь отправиться в концертное турне по Южным Штатам. Какой еще опыт у вас есть?
Связи с общественностью.
«Зелёная книга» — это фильм о двух мужчинах из разных миров.
Тони итальянец, жесткий человек, воспитанный улицей. Дон Ширли утонченный, очень образованный музыкант.
У них нет ничего общего. На дворе 62-й год. Тони полон предрассудков по отношению к таким людям, как Дон Ширли. Скажи, вкусно пахнет?
Я в принципе не ем жареную курицу.
Все ваши ее
У
обожают.
вас очень ограниченное представление обо мне, Тони.
Ну так секу, что к чему? С точки зрения Дока, Тони до того вульгарен, что поначалу даже вызывает отвращение.
Мне кажется, что вашим манерам не хватает утонченности.
Чё ты мне здесь яйца крутишь?
Потому что вы способны на большее.
Это история о препятствиях, которые Тони и Дон Ширли преодолевают вместе.
Этот джентльмен говорит, что мне не позволено здесь есть.
Эй, ну он сегодня играет.
Правила клуба, конечно, вы понимаете.
Они обнаруживают, что между ними есть много общего и учат друг друга принимать свои различия.
И как он только может им улыбаться и руки жать.
Нужно большое мужество, чтобы менять взгляды людей.
Интересно, как сближаются эти двое, которые поначалу казались такими разными. Ты сам свой народ не знаешь! Весь на понтах, лобаешь музыку для богатых!
То есть я недостаточно черный и недостаточно белый? Скажи, Тони, кто я такой? Эта история будет актуальной во все времена. Она о дружбе и главных вещах в жизни.
Это про то, что противоположности иногда притягиваются. Думаю, эта история будет понятна во всех странах и на всех языках.
Люди увидят и поймут, что это прекрасно. Бетховена лобать может каждый. Но твоя музыка, то, что ты делаешь, такое можешь только ты.
Спасибо, Тони. Но не каждый слабает Шопена так, как я.
Vale.
Yeah, Val Longa, that's me.
Fill it out while you wait.
What?
Fill it out while you wait.
Yeah. If you want me, it's a buck and a quarter.
It's just that one
We'll hire a little
reflection.
cheap, just bring that here.
Because those gaps, he can stop you. Like, well, wait a second. You have to say, here's the deal. Blah, 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 blah.
All right, here's the deal. I got no problem being on the road with you, but I ain't no butler. Hey, I'm Tony. Driving.
And background. And action.
Have a wonderful trip, sir.
He's only the greatest piano player in the world.
Is that right? You're good.
Don't be shy, Don. Tell her who you are.
Don't tell me anything. Show me.
I think your character knows a little more about music than I do.
No, I like what you're doing too, because you're doing a whole other thing. You're seeing this guy. It's a proud moment, you know? Very proud of this guy.
Please, and action.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Don Shirley Trio.
For reflections, I gotta have him pick up the box. Okay. Yeah, exactly. If you go over thinking what's going on, you don't think this is possible.
Yeah, when I'm home.
All right, guys. First scene, get some background back there. Let's see what we got here.
This gentleman says that I'm not permitted to eat here.
No, you don't understand. He's playing tonight. He's the main event.
Sounding speed. 2 cameras. Hey, Mark.
Because it's a smart thing, too.
That was a good time. I do that once a month for free.
You unbelievable.
Hey, Tony. I bet if we leave right now, we could make it.
Like what?
Christmas Eve, New York City.
Oh, it's Courtney's are connected.
When he walks over and Mr. Lawrence is
I was good friends with Brian Curry, one of the co-writers, for years. He was an actor who was in a couple of our movies, and he had small roles. I ran into him somewhere, and I said, "What's going on?" I said, "I'm writing a screenplay." And I said, "What is it?" He said, it's a story based on my friend's father. It's a story about a black concert pianist named Don Shirley, who lived above Carnegie Hall. In 1962, his record company sent him on a tour of the South, and he was understandably nervous, so he went down to Copacabana, hired the toughest bouncer in New York City, a guy named Tony Lip, 7th grade education, Italian kid, and they hit the road together. I was like, a home run. I said, that's an amazing story. We had a lot of material to go with. Tony Lip had, before he passed away, had left a tape where they videotaped him and audio taped him a different time, telling the story in detail, like hours of tapes. And then this happened, and then that happened. We also had all the letters that he had written home on the trip. So we went through the letters, and we went through the tapes, and we listened to the story, and then we told it the best way we could. It's called Green Book because of the Negro Motorist Green Book, which was used from 1936 to 1964 by black Americans when they traveled. It was something they could pick up only at Esso gas stations, by the way. Esso was the only gas station that welcomed black travelers. Others, they didn't want you to stop there. But Esso welcomed them, and they had the Negro Motorist Green Book, which told them where to, it was not published by Esso, but it was sold there. It was written by a man named Mr. Green, who had once traveled through the South, a black man, and had a hard time finding places to eat, sleep, get a haircut. So he wrote a book, and it published all the places across the country where black travelers could eat, sleep, go to a hardware store. It made it safe for them. Viggo and Mahershala have phenomenal chemistry together, and on and off screen. On screen, I was expecting that because they're both, the highest level actors. I didn't expect anything but them to have good chemistry on screen, and they do. But off screen, they do too. Viggo is he has an amazing attention to detail, and he's always thinking of and Mahershala is more of a Zen master who just kind of lays back there and comes in and does his thing and then steps away. When Linda came in, I guess the thing that separated her was the chemistry with Viggo. They just fit together, and they were kind of finishing each other's sentences. They seemed like a married couple. They seemed like they'd known each other since they were teenagers, which Tony Lip had with his wife, and they just there were just a lot of reasons that, you know, she also is Italian, Linda, and it was coming out of her. You know, you could just feel it.
I think what really intrigued me about Don Shirley was how complicated he was. There's just so much to pull from in terms of just the things he was dealing with, the things that he struggled with, the things that he exhibited a degree of excellence in. So just the range of things that I was going to be challenged with in tackling was really attractive. Green Book is in reference to what was called the Negro Motorist Green Book, which was around in the 60s, which basically instructed black people or directed black people where they could stay in the South safely and be welcomed, because, you know, our country was segregated at that time. And what I learned was that it was something that gave a lot of African Americans a little bit of peace in traveling, because they knew they could plot their journey. They knew exactly where they could stay and not necessarily go to these towns or these cities and be worried about finding a place to sleep. It's definitely more of a drama, but I think the way in which Peter Farrelly and the writers, Brian Curry and Nick Vallelonga, I think the way in which they just so perfectly sculpted this script that there hasn't been a lot of changes on the day, and they really struck a really beautiful balance of, I think, pulling you to the heights of laughter and sort of bringing you to the depths of someone's struggle and their pain. He's just immersed in the character, and so how he pitches ideas and bouncing things off you is something that is really unique, and I've just really learned a lot from how he approaches the character, how he lives in the character. I think I've always been that person who will say, can I get one more take? And Vigo will always ask for one more than I do. So he's very much a perfectionist, and it really has been a clinic and working with him, and a real joy, and he's been a wonderful ally. As a black musician wanting to play classical music, being limited to a certain type of music because of how people may not accept him, you know? And I think that that is relevant in a certain way now, because just take Hollywood for instance, can a woman lead X, Y, and Z? Well, the perception is these films don't do well here, or this doesn't sell here. And so the effort is not truly made to do that overseas or do that internationally, because the perception is it won't do well there. So how does that ever change? How does someone ever really reach their capacity or their potential if the ideal is already that you're a failure, or that you will fail at something before you're even given the opportunity? So I don't think I don't think we've gotten over that as a culture, whether that be specifically about an African-American issue or a gender issue or LGBTQ issue, whatever. You know, those issues have always been a part of our culture, and I think that they continue to transform in some way, and that's something that we always have to shed light on and try to eradicate.
Tony's such an interesting character because he's so street smart and so oblivious, and you know, he's so smart in certain ways and so oblivious in others, and he's got a long way to go. And the thing that I liked about Dolores is that she knows that about him. You know, she doesn't like some of his thoughts, and the idea that he changes is something that was really appealing to me within the character. La Copa is closed for repairs, so they have a few months where he really needs to find work, and you know, he has a couple choices, but the other choices aren't so upstanding. So for her to see him get a good job with somebody and do some real upstanding work instead of some sort of side jobs that are questionable with some questionable type of people, you know, some like mob type people, I think she's pretty happy for him to have a good job. They loved each other until they died, and I think they, you know, sort of came to rely on each other very, very much. And the idea that he left, I think, was hard for her. You know, he would go to work maybe all night at the Copa, but he still came home every day, and their family was very important to them. And looking into the letters and reading the real letters between the two of them, and seeing how much they missed each other. and probably how difficult it was for her to be, you know, home with the two of them without him, and worrying about him on the road. The beautiful part about being able to play Dolores is I got to speak to the family. I got to speak to everybody. I got to speak to her brother, her brother-in-law, her, you know, her children, of course. You know, Nick and Frankie are here. And you know, it's so funny because we're doing the scene, my first scene that we shot was us saying goodbye to Tony as he goes. And there's, you know, Nick and Frankie, the little kids, playing them. And then here's the real Frankie with his uncle and his other uncle playing the grandfathers. And you have sort of these real people in the scene playing their older relatives while the younger people are playing them, and it just is a really interesting dynamic, but it's wonderful. And you know, as an Italian American, I'm very familiar with the dynamics, and so it feels very comfortable to me.
All of the pieces we're playing in the film are direct transcriptions from Donald Shirley's recordings, and so I tried to do my best to figure out, you know, some of the recordings are a little bit older, so they're harder to hear, but for the most part, all the notes are exactly what he played, because we felt like the way that he arranged a lot of these jazz compositions is he would fuse in a lot of classical pieces from the classical repertoire. And like, you know, the beginning of Lullaby of Birdland might have like a Bach fugue in the middle of it, or it might have something that sounds like Clair de Lune. And he would just do these really intricate arrangements and then improvise on top of that. And so we tried to like transcribe as much as we could to try to keep it as close to the original as possible. The way we're thinking about approaching it is to try and create the sound world that Don Shirley himself was inspired by. And so like creating a score that's inspired by like Ravel or Gershwin or pieces like that. And also a lot of the like Negro spirituals and gospel music that he also was super influenced by. So trying to figure out a way to combine those two things is the way that we're thinking about approaching the score. Rehearsal is pretty awesome. It was pretty great to like, you know, the first time we met, we booked an hour time in one of the Steinway showrooms to just kind of like have an introductory meeting kind of thing. And we ended up spending like 3 hours together. And he played one scale. I taught him a major scale, and he played that one scale for that entire 3 hours, which is pretty incredible. He just has a really laser focus when he's trying to do these things. He wanted to be a classical pianist, a concert pianist, and play on those types of stages and those types of venues. And it seems like his label basically said that nobody's going to listen to a black pianist play this classical music, and so they told him to play jazz standards. And I think that's kind of why he still wanted to figure out how he can incorporate these classical pieces into those jazz pieces so that he could feel at least like he was honoring the music that he loved a little bit. But it seemed to be pretty difficult for him throughout his entire career that he had to play this music that everybody was excited for him to play, but he himself never really connected to it in the way that I think everybody thought he did.
In this movie, you have two underdogs. You know, you have Tony, who's an uneducated guy trying to put food on the table for his family, who's out of a job. And then you have, Mahershala Ali, who's, the Don Shirley character, who's a fish out of water. You know, he has everything, and yet what does he have? You know, he doesn't know really who he is, and he's a great piano player, but he's not playing the kind of music he wants to play, and lives alone in this giant, Versailles palace of a place. Just having, just he's alone, and he meets a guy, a family man, and that's what, that's how they gel. Every time I'd see his comedies, there'd be one point in them, at least, where there'd be a tear in my eye. He has the ability to bring out emotion in his characters. I mean, as crazy as they could be and as zany as they could be, there was always a great heart to him.
As they get into the South, things do indeed become very, very tricky and very confrontational with a lot of people, and the cops don't like seeing a white guy drive a black guy around, and the people don't like seeing a black guy go into a bar. But, Dr. Shirley has never really been in the South. What he's read and what he's seen in newsreels and what he thinks he knows isn't really exactly the reality. And the reality is hard for him to comprehend. I think it will remind people that we kind of all really kind of love each other in reality, but some of us are just scared to just let it happen.
Both Mahershala and Viggo are committed actors. Committed. They don't just show up on the day and recite lines. They're into their characters. They know how they think, how their Viggo, especially how his body moves, and Yeah, they've done quite a bit of research, and we're lucky in this case that both the characters that they play are based on real people, so there's some amount of research one could do. I think she brings a sort of tenderness, and yet she's not a pushover. So you need to be strong if you're going to be married to Tony Lip, but you also, have to be a tender person and somebody that Tony wants to not let down, and he wants to live up to the man that she thinks he is.
Green Book was what African Americans used back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. Actually, some of the hotels still exist to this day, and it was safe zones. It was basically safe locations for like hotels, gas stations, restaurants, places you can go in the South where you would not run into the persecution of the civil unrest at the time. The story is about a classical pianist who hires an Italian, you don't want to call him a mobster, or he's basically a tough guy, to chaperone him or be his driver through the South, knowing that he's going to encounter some, colorful, situations and environments, and he wanted someone that could be almost like a bodyguard for him. Respect. Respect for one another, respect for just society as a whole. Again, we're all evolving, we're all growing. And we had two individuals who came from two ends of the earth, basically came together and found, a bond and a unity that prior to this, prior to them meeting each other, they would never think would exist. And I think that applies to nowadays. It's like, look, just because you don't know someone on the other side of the earth, the other side of the state, the other side of the town, doesn't necessarily mean, you can't, have a respectful relationship with them.
He was a character. He lived quite a rich life. He was pretty special. I remember one time he was interviewed about The Sopranos, and they said, "How does it feel this late in life to be a star, to be be famous now?" And he goes, "I was famous before I was famous." So that's how he was. He was famous in the neighborhood for eating more hot dogs than anybody else, for eating more burgers. He was famous for his strength, he was just a big character. When he walked into the room, you knew he was there. He had it his whole life. He was one of those New York, some sort of Damon Runyon-esque characters. He was meticulous, well-dressed, well-spoken, well-educated man. And he was so nice to myself and my brother. And he was very, very interested in my father's family, that my father was a family man. He gave us gifts. I remember he gave me ice skates when I was small. Just really a special human being, a very special person. And having Mahershala play him is like beyond belief. He morphed into my father. I know the first time I met him, we have a restaurant called Tony Lip's in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. And my brother was there, my uncle, my father's brother, and all my uncles, and we were eating. And little by little during the course, and by the end of the meal, Vigo was smoking, and he was talking like us and studying us. Even from then, from the very beginning, he got it. And luckily, I had tape recorded my father. There was audio tapes, and there's a lot of video on my father because of my recording him. On top of, he was in The Sopranos, so there's stuff. So Vigo did what he had to do, and sometimes it's eerie for me on the set. His mannerisms, the way he smokes. My father smoked a certain way, lit a cigarette. The way he sat, he's got all of it down. And like I see my father, it's very eerie, but in a good way. Part of this also was to have an uplifting, happy ending, which was true anyway. But I think it's important. It's important now. People are different, but yet we're all the same. We all go through the same emotions and the same feelings, and we have the same flaws and the same fears and the same wants and needs. So I think two different men, opposite sides of the world and every level, coming together and forming a friendship like that, it should show that everyone can do that.
Strangely, some of these themes have resurfaced. Some of the issues have resurfaced in our society today. I think the story is quite relevant given the climate socially. And when you have two people from disparate backgrounds, finding a way to live and coexist together to meet a goal, it speaks to how we need to learn to coexist in society. But apart from that, philosophically, I just think it's a story just about human beings learning to accept each other. And it's a fun, heartbreaking in some ways, beautifully directed, beautifully acted film. Dr. Shirley was a renowned pianist, and I tell you, he played world-renowned pianist. And the fact that he had a choice to, play different cities and venues, but he decided that as an African-American man, that he should travel throughout the Deep South to bring humanity to people of color in a way that they had not been regarded during that time period. He chose to do that to help change those perceptions of people of color. When we first meet Donald Shirley, he is preparing to, he's looking for some interviewing assistants. And I tell you, from a personal standpoint, to see an African-American man during the 60s, well-to-do, affluent, to me that was very important. And the fact that the role reversals, he was a person, interviewing help. He was looking for, an assistant, someone to travel with, who would take care of his needs. And that was something very refreshing, because I did a movie called The Help in the 60s. So to see that, to me, I don't know, it made me smile.